Welcome to Kingdomize, the podcast, where we discuss how to see our lives and our world through a kingdom lens, how to infuse kingdom culture into our families, our workplaces, and our cities, as we all participate in the dream of Jesus to see his kingdom on earth as it is in heaven.
Welcome. You have just joined us to Kingdomize, the podcast. We are so pleased that you're giving us your ear, your time, and maybe your eyes to watch this podcast. We trust that you're going to be helped and blessed and encouraged. Today, I'm with my good friend, Dr. Brian Beatty. In our team, in our Kingdomize team, we say he is the guru when it comes to city transformation, when it comes to bringing the kingdom of God into the environment of a secular environment. We say he's the guru. He's been at this for decades. And I love talking to Brian about this. I love his passion, but I love his intellectual capital that can actually help those who are just beginning to think about bringing God into the city and those who are well versed in that whole process. And so, Brian, great to be with you again today. So pleased that we could get together. And I'm excited about what you're going to share. It's going to be awesome, I know, because we've chatted for many years about these things. We're letting other people into the secret of how they can transform this city. So over to you, my friend.
Amazing. Thanks, Ian. And guru, I don't know that anyone ever called me a guru before, so I'm pretty excited about that. So we've been talking now for a few weeks, Ian, you and I specifically, about transforming cities. So under the Kingdomize banner, we call this community transformation. We're at session 6, which is evaluating the needs of the city. So I'm glad you brought up the idea about thinking through things, because this is actually the thing that I would say even people that have a passion for city transformation, they don't like this session, because it's just thinking, and it's getting me. Most reformers want to get out and do something, but this just helps them strategize by what we're saying, evaluate the needs of the city. And so we've talked for the last 5 sessions about the concentric circles that happens for a transformational minded person, where you get a vision and you dream with God, and then it affects you, and it affects those in your sphere, it affects those in the other churches, then it affects those in all the other spheres together. And this is the one that actually takes like a little in-depth look at what's actually happening in my city, what's actually going on. And if you're listening and you've been down this road of city transformation, you probably heard the term, it's exegeting the city. It's analyzing this city. It's interpreting. So who lives there? What do they need? Why did they need it? What's the root issues of why that's there? And how do we help? More importantly, so the purpose is not just to get information and to think we're smart because we thought a lot and strategized a lot. It's not that, in case you want to go do stuff. It's actually for the purpose of positive, sustainable transformation. That's why we do this. That's why we actually evaluate the needs of the city.
No, that's great, Brian. And I know for some people, and I would include myself in some of that, I had no idea where to start. And, because of our relationship and because of the book that you have written, God in the City, obviously there's a lot of information there, but I'm looking forward to this part of the podcast where you give us some practical information on how we can actually exegete the city, how we can actually understand our city from a very pragmatic and a practical viewpoint. So yeah, just tell us what you've learned over the last 2 decades.
So I'm a visual person, so I try to create things so in a way that I can visualize them so that I can go and live them. So where I start in this scenario, under evaluating the needs of the city, I envision that there's a net under my city. I envision there's a net. So anything that happens, so my city is floating above, and underneath there's this net. And this net is there so everything that happens in the city, if something falls through, it gets caught in the net. So the net is created so there's not too much bunching in one place and a bunch of holes here, but we're creating a net so everything that's in the city, so if there's homelessness, if there's food inequality, if there's education inequality, whatever the needs are, we're able to evaluate it, create a net so no one gets missed. So this net, we build this net under our city, is for the sake of catching all the needs. So it's for the purpose of the shalom of the city. And so our friend Bruce Friesen, one of our partners, he loves the word shalom, and so do I. It means that there's nothing broken, there's nothing missing. So this, I've never called it a shalom net, and I probably never will again, but we want the peace of God to be in our city. Back in Jeremiah 29, that everyone loves, that God has a plan for you to not to prosper you, to harm you, give you hope in the future. Like, we love verse 11, but I actually like verse 7 in Jeremiah 29, because it says, pray for the peace of the city, because if it prospers, you prosper. And so this shalom, this peace, and so you want to bring together, while you're building the net, you're actually now bringing people together, because there's people that have to think big, macro thinkers. So those macro thinkers can see the whole net. I can sit and have chats with people. I call them and say, hey, Dave, let's chat about the city. And we'll chat about all the needs in the city, and we can talk that way. And I can call some people and say, hey, Jim, let's talk about the big net. And they'll go, I have no idea what you're talking about. But if you want to talk about homelessness, I get it. And so we talk about the net and the knots. Some people are macro thinkers. They can see the whole thing. Some are micro thinkers, and they can see one knot. And we need them all. It's based on your personality. It's based on how you're wired. It's based on your gifts. And we need the micro thinkers. We need the macro thinkers to build this net. As we're evaluating the needs of the city, to build a net under the city, we have to bring all these people together. And what that does, Ian, it gives value to every kind of thinker in our city, because that's really important. Because sometimes in this dialogue about city transformation, it's like, you just want to think about the big stuff and you don't need anything. I just want to care for homelessness. It's like, good, so do we, as a piece of the net, as a knot in the net, to take care of all the needs. So that's where we go. So we encourage people to start by, when you're evaluating needs, when you're executing your city, you don't want to miss anything. So start this way. That's what we encourage.
I mean, that's awesome, Brian. I think most of us, even a smaller city, I live in a smaller city now, 50,000 people, but I'd lived in an area that was a part of a large 4 million metropolitan area, and to me, it sometimes feels overwhelming. The needs are quite significant, and you've honed in on homelessness. I mean, homelessness is an increasing issue, right, in the Western world, particularly, and you would think, well, for our economic development, how the heck do we have homeless people? And yet we discover that we have mental health issues that is escalating at remarkable fast levels. And so when we begin to think of the net, and we think of the vastness of the net, like where do we start? How do we get to that information? How do we exegete that information? Where do we go to find the stuff in our city that needs to be fixed?
Yeah, really good question. Really important. And so one of kind of my heroes of the faith, his name is Tommy Barnett. He had a church in Phoenix, often went to their pastor school back in the late 80s, early 90s. And then he and then his son went there to Los Angeles to start the Dream Center, which actually became kind of a catalyst from our thinking of what we're doing now with our transformation centers. But they would intentionally consider how to look at the needs of the city. And so sometimes people will say, well, what do I do? How do I do this? I would just encourage you. We've got our own way that we measure. But Tommy would say, we count people because people count. he was a visionary and a thinker, but he was very clear to go, you need to start measuring stuff. You need to know who's around and what they're around for. And I don't know anyone that's done the meet the needs of the city, like find a need and fill it, more than Tommy Brennan and his son Matthew have. But it's really that. It's really how do we find out what our city really needs? And so, we've talked about Ed Silvoso here often, fan of what Ed does, part of his network for many years, actually led the movement here in Canada for 3 years. But Ed's got a way that he measures, which I really like. So he talks about it in 4 levels. He said, so the needs can be material, motivational, relational, or spiritual. So he brings into those 4 areas. So material, so physical needs, financial needs. So material, motivational, like what are you doing and why? Like are you out there doing stuff? What's your motivation? Relational, what are your friendships? What are your dynamics relationally? And then spiritual, how are you with God and the whole love thing? So I really like that. That's easy to understand for people. And I also like it because, as he teaches, is that both what we would call the poor people in our cities and the rich people in our city, it levels a playing field, because typically the poor people that we would say are materially poor or motivationally poor, we would say, they're actually rich in relationships and spiritual things. Like you go and speak to them, or we did lots of stuff on the streets, and man, they would talk to you easily about God. They would talk to you easily about their relationship. They had incredible relationship networks, but they just didn't have money or really any motivation to get any more and whatever. Yeah. So, but the rich people, they have what we would say material things, or they're motivated for sure. But man, they don't trust people. Their relationships are typically, these are generalizations, but their relationships are often challenging. And, again, generally, they don't think they need God because they're self-made people. So what it does, these 4 areas allow us to level the playing field. Everyone's rich in some ways. Everyone's poor in some ways. How do we find the needs that they have and help them measure it and then meet the needs? So I like what Silvosa does. We've actually created our own dynamics, our own way that we measure. We call it a multi-column balance sheet at Kingdomize. So, and this is when we go and we would work with a company or a church or even a city network. We would talk about kingdom alignment. This is probably number 1. We would talk about personal and family health. We think that's important, that if you're doing stuff, it shouldn't really affect your family or personality or yourself or your family negatively. We talk about organizational culture. Does your culture look like kingdom culture? We do talk about economic viability, like is this working financially? Is it sustainable? We talk about how it affects your environment, the external environment, and then your greater community. So we have measuring rods as well. But I wanted to add 2 more, and I'm not going to go deeply into these, but there's a gentleman named Glenn Smith from Montreal. He started an organization called Christian Direction. He's got a great 12-point grid of what it looks like to meet the needs of a city. I'll talk about in Canada. So I'm in Canada, just outside of Toronto. Our community foundations across Canada, not Christian organizations, but they've done incredible work on bringing together, what are the needs that are in a city? Are they being met? Now, they wouldn't go into spiritual needs, but besides that, they've done incredible things. So if you're in Canada, or even if you're not, you can look up community foundations in Canada and find out how people are measuring to see if what they're doing in the community is impactful, or whether you're just doing stuff. And this is important, Ian, and we're going to talk about this at the end. This is important because we really don't want to just be on mission where we're going to keep meeting needs. We're going to keep feeding homeless. We would like to get to the root issue and go, well, why are people still homeless? Or why are people still hungry? Well, we could solve that maybe. Maybe we could get to the root of homelessness, or we could get to the root of food inequality, and we could solve that. And so go beyond missional thinking, being on mission, to transformational, where you're actually getting to the root of the problem. And so that's what we would like to encourage people to do as well. So
I
that
think
would be what we encourage.
Yeah, like I've heard you say before, I mean, I was involved in the 80s in what was something described as spiritual mapping,
Yeah.
where you took intercessors into an area we were church planting, find out what spiritual forces were there, what we were up against if we're going to start a community of faith, etc. And I think there's absolute validity in that. But I think if you don't know where to start, I think I've heard you say this numbers of times. Just go to the mayor.
Yeah.
Just go to the mayor's office. Ring up social services. Like they'll have a flipping list as long as your arm and legs of the needs of the city because they're dealing with it on a daily basis. And it's not theoretical. It's not a pet hobby. Like we all have things that we feel we gravitate to, right? So whether it's the homeless or whether it's marriage counseling or whether it's mental health, we all have something that we gravitate to. But you go you go to the people who run the city, they may have personal interests, but they'll give you a list. They'll tell you exactly what's going on and what's absolutely needed. So I love that advice that you gave some time ago, and I'm just sort of throw it in here now because I think it's so practical.
No, that's good. I appreciate that, Ian. And that is where we're going next, actually, because I mean, you can talk about the theories of the net and the knots, and you can talk about the needs, and there's lots of people that sit and talk about those forever. But we at Kingdomize, we want to get as practical as possible. So we want to talk about how to do it, the know-how, and so I always say, build relationships, be ready to serve, and ask them what they need. And so, just like you said, I mean, there are many people in your city where you are right now. There are many people in your city that know what the city needs. You may not. And so, Ian, as you said, I would never say don't worship, don't pray, don't ask God. I mean, you need to constantly be doing that. That to me, that's a given. I agree with you. So, but I for a long time, I didn't feel like the spiritual mappers got practical. I don't want them not do that. I want people that are incredible worship. I want the intercessors. I want the prophetic people, right? But then I want the practical people too. And it'd be great. I love it when they're the same person. I love it when the prophetic person is practical. So,
Yeah.
But if you don't know how to do that, if you don't know how to find the needs, it's like you said, like call your city councilor. There's a city councilor in your ward or however your city breaks it down. Build a relationship with the mayor, build a relationship with somebody in the city, build a relationship with somebody doing something and go, how did you get involved? What are you doing? And so our story, as you know, is that I was introduced to our mayor by a mutual friend. We had lunch together. I started building a relationship with him. And because I built a relationship with him and I was now leading what we call One Church, the pastors network in the city, I invited him to come to one of our meetings. There's probably 50 or 60 leaders there from different churches and organizations. And I just said, Chris, just come and talk about the needs in the city. How can we help? Right? Because we had gotten to the place as One Church that we were going to not just keep talking about it, but actually get involved. So the mayor came and he said, we're like every other city. We have homelessness. There are people that need jobs, the economy, families want to feel safe. He said, but you didn't need to start there. He said, let me tell you something that's on my heart. I know that there are kids in our city right now that every day they go to school hungry. He said, if you could do this, if you want to do something that is on my heart right now, if you could start serving the schools by feeding those that are going to school hungry, I would love that. And that day, Ian, the mayor walked out of the meeting. We stayed longer and we started a task force that day to start feeding kids in schools. Eventually, it led to adopting schools, not just to do the feeding programs, which we kept doing, but actually adopting schools. They knew that there were churches in that area that would help them. And I want to add that to what you said earlier about smaller communities to larger cities. The way you do city transformation is the same no matter what, because you have to break big cities into small communities. There's neighborhoods. That's where you have the most impact, right? And then neighborhoods get together and eventually city connection. So ask somebody, build a relationship, be ready to serve, find out what they need. And then you don't have to pray at the beginning about it, but after you've met somebody and see what there's like, okay, Lord, what part of the needs of the city can my group take care of? Where do we start meeting the practical needs and just engage? Just engage.
No, that's good, Brian. I mean, obviously in most communities, there's genres or groups of people that meet exclusively, right? And so it may well be you may feel a sense in our city, for example, we have a football club. So that's football with you kick with the ball. You
Oh,
kick with the ball.
like
Not
soccer.
soccer as well. Yeah. So some of the people from our um, community of faith, they feel drawn to that, and so that's fantastic. I have another friend who's offered himself to be a chaplain at at one of the football clubs, the higher up, this first division football club in the UK, and he does pastoral care for the young lads under 18,
Yeah.
and so he says, okay, there's a great need there. That's where I'm going to fit myself. I'm homeless. That's not for me. This is for me. And so I think it becomes very liberating to know there's not one size fits all, but whatever God has put in your heart, see it that you're a part of the net and the knot for the city, and you actually work within the environment. So we're a team. We're a team absolutely executing this. And so I've observed what you've done in terms of education and business, um, and the homeless and people on the street. Like, you've done a whole gamut of things, I mean, you didn't do everything all at once, but you have tried and been led, and you've had people that you've partnered with to actually bring health and vitality to help the city thrive. And I love that. So I think there's a place for everyone, right? There's a place for everyone in city transformation. You just have to find your niche. But I guess our appeal to you would be, don't do it on your own. Don't do it on your own. Join hands.
Yeah, 100%. And that's really why we talk about it this way, Ian, is because we've waited until step 6 to talk about this, because you've already realized you need each other, right?
Yeah.
It's not like a single church is going to do this, or even if all the churches in the city came together as the church came together, that won't work either, because we need business, we need education, we need government. It is that integration of all of the above. So as you're evaluating now, it's like, okay, I can serve in the football club. Perfect. God loves those people. Do it. I can serve with homelessness. Great. Do that. I can serve the business. Great. Do that. And eventually somebody's looking at the whole picture going, okay, we've got a lot of, one of the things I'll often say, Ian, is that churches like doing food pantries. I found a lot of churches have food pantries, and it's like, well, it seems like we got a lot of food out there. Is it getting to the people? But what about this need here? Like, we're bunching up the net with all these food pantries. We've got some holes over here. So somebody's got to be looking at the city going, how does this work? And again, and as we wrap up today, Ian, this is where I wanted to get to. I mentioned on the way by about this idea of transformational thinking. It's not just being on mission. And I'm a fan of people living on mission. Like, I want you to realize why you exist, and you're doing that. So I'm living on mission. Business is my mission. Good. But the kingdom is your mission.
Yeah.
So the kingdom is bigger than just business. So you need
Yeah.
each other. So transformational thinking is beyond missional thinking. It's like, how do we get to the root of the problems? If it's not in heaven, it shouldn't be in my city. So as far as I know, there's no homelessness in heaven. As far as I know. As far as I know, there's some food in heaven. So if that's the case, then I want that to be my city. Can I solve it all? 100% I can't. So who will I link arms with? Who will I partner with? I may never actually have a homeless ministry, but I can sure give money to them, because those people around the corner, they're doing an incredible job. We let them do that. And so this idea, and I know, Ian, we've talked about this a lot, about is how do we move from, once you get somebody from being a Christian to move to, okay, now I'm gonna be Christian at work. Fantastic. Can we get them one more nudge forward to, yep, it's at work and it's in your church and it's in education, but can it now be all together? Can we have a transformational mindset where we're working together to build that knot? We're taking care, build that net rather, and we're taking care of all the knots for the sake of the city and dealing with the root issues. Can we do that? So there's nothing missing. There's nothing broken. We have the shalom of the city. I do want to add one more thing, though.
Go ahead.
I do want to say, before we wrap up today, I do want to say that the way we measure things has to change. So, and I'm specifically going to talk about it, and I'll just let the people listening today in on some background dialogue Kingdomize is having in the background right now. We're talking about what is kingdom metrics versus, say, church metrics. So for years, for years as a pastor, I had to fill out a form for my denomination, and it was be like, so how many butts, how many bucks, how many baptisms, right? So how many people, how many butts, how many bucks, how much money did you make this year, and how many people got baptized? That was the metrics that you would send away to your denominational affiliation. It's like, well, that's great, except for nobody in my city cares about any of those things. They just don't. The city doesn't care about. They don't care about butts and bucks and baptism unless we're using those things for the city. So I would say our dialogue right now as Kingdomize, and feel free, you need to jump in here as well, but how do we evaluate with kingdom metrics to go, if there's material poverty in my city, we should change that. If there's motivational poverty, if there's relational poverty, if there's spiritual poverty, it is up to us. It is up to us to measure these things and then change. If we don't like what we measure, if we don't like the answer once we've measured, we should be about changing it. And that's transformation. We should change it.
No, absolutely, Brian. Absolutely. And it's a journey that we're on at the moment. And it's a part of renewing our thinking. Sometimes, I say to people, it's great that we had a worship service and we love worship, but I want to know how much of Jesus is in the city. It's great he's in the church. It's great he's in the building, but I want to know how much is he in the city, and I can look for marks that he's in the city, because those things that we discussed earlier in this, motivational poverty is being reduced, economic poverty is being reduced, spiritual poverty is being reduced. So we have metrics to find out, okay, so how are we doing here? If we just have, for example, you have Dallas Fort Worth, it has 25 churches over 10,000 people. 25 churches over 10,000 people. And yet, when an exegesis of Dallas Fort Worth metropolitan area took place, there was massive amount of poverty, tremendous truancy from schools, people living in terrible situations. Hopes and aspirations for their family was very low. I would say, so we have all those bodies in the city, but we don't have the kingdom in the city, because the people have not been equipped yet to take the kingdom where they live, where they are, where they work. And so for us is we want to see atmospheric change, but we want to see social change as well, as a result of the kingdom coming. As Jesus says, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And so we're excited about that for sure.
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly what we're talking about today, Ian. That's so good. And often I'll just leave this as a comment on the way out here today, is that I'll often talk to people and say, we were raised to build churches or businesses that would be the best business or church in the city. And we would say, well, what if it could be the best church for the city?
Yeah.
You don't need to have the best church in the city, but could it be the best church for the city? Could it be the best business for the city.
Yeah.
You know, back in the day, there was this comment that was made all the time. It's like, if your church was gone tomorrow, would anyone notice? And I would say for most, it would be no. If your business was gone tomorrow, would anyone notice? Well, we want to change all of that. We want to be the people that evaluate and execute our cities, because everything matters in our city. We want the kingdom to come everywhere. And so if we left, then those homeless people, they'd have no homes. Like, we want to be meeting those needs on purpose, because that is what Jesus would do. He would meet those needs for the sake of the people that he loves. And then while he's doing it, he would go, oh, by the way, there's a better way to live, right? And while you're serving those needs, and this is what we found, Ian, as we serve the needs of the people asked us about God. We would just be meeting their needs, and they would ask us, why are you doing this? And I'm telling you, evangelism gets so much easier when you do it by meeting the things they need. And they're going, why are you doing this? It's like, and our answer was always, we just want to show you the love of God in a practical way. And I mean, that was evangelism 101, the easiest ever. And then Holy Spirit would speak to them, and we would take them farther than that. Anyway, so we just want to encourage people to do that. Like, as you're listening today, really want you to consider this today. How are you looking and evaluating what's happening in your city? Who are you evaluating the city with? Because as we've said several times today, this won't happen because you want to do it, or your church wants to do it, or your individual business wants to do it. This is now getting people, solution-oriented people from different spheres coming together, looking at the city, evaluating the needs, executing the needs, and then being ready to work to bring the kingdom in practical ways.
Absolutely fabulous, Brian. I have no doubt that people listening today, you have been inspired. No doubt you've been, and some have been challenged, and some have been inspired and challenged. And look, we are here to support you and help you. These are not just talks for you to go, okay, these talks are great for a coffee, or 2 coffees or 3 coffees. No, we are here to help you. We want to help you bring God's kingdom into the city, because we want cities to flourish. We want people to flourish. And we believe that maybe even as you are listening to this, you are part of God's answer for your community, for your city. Maybe you're the catalyst to get something going. And look, we are here to help you. You can email us, you can contact us. We'll do what we can to support you so that God's kingdom comes to the city. Friends, thank you so much for joining us today. We've loved what Dr. Brian has said. We love his enthusiasm. I love his intellectual capital. We've enjoyed being with you today, and we trust that you've enjoyed it too. We are here every week. Why don't you tap that button, subscribe? As soon as a new podcast comes out, you will hear from us. We bring one out every single week. There's probably 40 or 50 for you to look at if this is your first time today. But we trust that you've been helped, trust that you've been encouraged, and we look forward to partnering with you again, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Thanks for joining us today on Kingdomize, the podcast. Let's keep the discussion going throughout the week on our socials or on our website, kingdomizeglobal.com. Contact us today to see how we can walk together to see more of God's kingdom in your city as it is in heaven.